Wadr en collaboration avec la National Endowment for Democracy, NED.
WADR. You can listen to us on 94.9 FM in Dakar through our website www.wadr.org. WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Banjul, 7 p.m. in Porto Novo. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Here are the top stories. Nigerian opposition criticizes Tinubu's government over rising poverty and inequality 65 years after independence.
In just 1 year of this administration, 15 million Nigerians were pushed into acute poverty. Today, more than 150 million Nigerians lack access to basic health, education, water, and sanitation.
Mali's former member of parliament, Masu Haidara, assassinated in armed attack. Fourth edition of the African Summit concludes in Dakar with call for the protection of information integrity. Ghana's President Mahama reiterates commitment to combat illegal mining.
We need a substantially bigger budget than we have currently to be able to win this war. Happily, budget hearings have started. The budget for next year is going to be presented to Parliament, and my expectation is that the Minister of Finance will give a much bigger allocation to this fight against galamsey.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Christopher Aticho with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners within the sub-region and beyond. Newslink begins in the Central Sahel region, particularly in Mali, on a sad note because former Member of Parliament Abdul Jali Masu Haidara have been assassinated in an armed attack on the Segu-Bamako road. The former member of parliament, who doubles as a religious figure in the Senegal region, was committed to serving his community. His assassination, which occurred on Thursday evening, comes amid a tense security situation following multiple attacks by the JNIM, the support group for Islam and Muslims. Details with Imo Edits.
At around 4 p.m. Thursday, a former National Assembly member, Abdul Jalil Mansour Haidara's vehicle was ambushed about 15 kilometers from Konobugu on the Segu-Bamako road. Armed men stationed at an improvised checkpoint opened fire as the vehicle approached. Haidara, seated in the front seat, was fatally shot and died on the spot. 4 other passengers sustained minor injuries. News of his death has deeply shaken the city of Segu. A former member of parliament under President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, Haidara was also a respected religious leader and the founder of Segu TV, the first private regional television channel in Mali. Beyond his political and religious roles, he was widely admired for his social initiatives. He provided ambulances, hearses, and water tours for the community, and only last Sunday distributed school kits to more than 300 orphans. His funeral is scheduled for Sunday 10 a.m. in Segu, where the city will bid him farewell to a man remembered for his generosity and solidarity. Haidara's assassination comes amid a wave of violence attributed to the jihadist group JNIM, which has staged several attacks along the same road. Just last Wednesday, an army convoy was ambushed in the area. The military has not disclosed casualty figures but says such operations against armed terrorist groups are ongoing.
And that was a report by our correspondent in Bamako, Wali Ochiam, and presented by Imo Edits. Away from the Sahel, let me take you to Nigeria, where opposition parties are criticizing the government handling of key national issues, including education, poverty, and inequality. The criticism comes as the country marks 65 years of independence amid ongoing social and economic challenges. Opposition voices argue that urgent and concrete reforms are needed to rescue the education sector, reduce poverty, and bridge the widening gap of inequality, issues they say cannot be addressed without or through promises alone. WADR's Abuja correspondent Usman Umar reports.
Nigeria's 65th anniversary has opened the floodgates of criticism from leading political figures who argue that the country's independence dream has been betrayed. Former Anambra State Governor and former presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, said leadership failures have worsened poverty and inequality. He cites figures showing that over 15 million Nigerians have fallen into acute poverty this past year, with more than 150 million still deprived of healthcare, education, and clean water.
In just 1 year of this administration, 15 million Nigerians were pushed into acute poverty. Today, more than 150 million Nigerians lack access to basic health, education, water, and sanitation. The number is growing daily under the APC government that pursues brutal revenue-driven policies while ignoring the people's welfare.
Obi also warns that democracy in Nigeria is becoming undemocratic, serving only the elite while ordinary citizens struggle. The Action Democratic Congress, ADC, through its spokesperson, Bolaji Abdullahi, also commented on President Tinubu's Independence Day speech, dismissing the president's claim that the worst is over as political rhetoric. The People's Democratic Party, on the other hand, also added its voice, calling the president's address boring and misleading. PDP's National Secretary, Ibrahim Abdullahi, accused the ruling party of weaponizing poverty. As Nigeria turns 65, opposition voices agree that urgent reforms are needed to rescue education, tackle poverty, and bridge inequality. Issues, they say, cannot be solved by mere promises. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Still in Nigeria, former President Goodluck Jonathan says the abduction of the Chibok schoolgirls in the 2014 remains a lasting scar on his legacy. Speaking at the launch of a memoir titled Scars, Nigeria's Journey and the Boko Haram Conundrum, the former Chief General Lucky Irabo, the former president, revealed that the tragedy continues to harm him, even as many of the girls remain missing. Take a listen to him.
The title of the book is quite interesting, Scars and the Boko Haram Conundrum. It is interesting because, when I was in office, and one of the major scars on my government, and would be on my face, and like Bishop Cook has said, no plastic or cosmetic surgeon can remove it, is the issue of the Chibok girls. It's a scar that I will die with. But later on, people may know a little more details. And that's also to do with the Boko Haram. What do they really want? Of course, our chairman raised the issue when interviewed some of them, and they gave him some perspective. But probably one day, I pray that some of the Boko Haram leaders may be literate enough to document what they have done. If you go through a research, interview a lot of people, yes, you'll get part of the story, but you will never get the full story of the Boko Haram. Because I was there, the Boko Haram started 2009 when I was the vice president to late Yaradua. Of course, I took over 2010 for 5 years, battling with the Boko Haram until I left. I thought that immediately I leave, within a reasonable time, late General Buhari was going to wipe them out, but till today, the Boko Haram is still there. So the issue of Boko Haram is a little more complex than sometimes we can conjecture.
Nigeria's former president, Goodluck Jonathan.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Togo, the Senate, the upper chamber of parliament, has opened its second ordinary session of 2025 at the Palais de Congrès in Lomé. The session focuses on reviewing the draft budget law for the year 2026 fiscal year, which will set out the course for the nation's economic and social policies. Francis Boniface completes the story.
After a 3-month parliamentary recess, senators returned to the chamber. The Senate's second ordinary session of 2025 complies with the provisions of Article 12, Paragraph 2 of the Constitution. For President Barry Musa Barke, this session, focused on examining the draft budget law for the 2026 fiscal year, is of great importance to the Togolese nation. According to him, it is crucial for the country's economic and social direction.
This session centered mainly on the examination of the financial law project for the management of the year 2026 and is of great importance for our nation. It is decisive for the economic and social orientations of our country, influencing the ambitions of our republic as well as the future of our territories. We therefore owe to the course of this work, of this session, to be guided by the vision of a peaceful Togo.
Present at this ceremony, the minister responsible for the institutions of the Republic, Pakom Ajuruvi, emphasized the importance of this session in consolidating democratic and institutional achievement.
The opening of this second ordinary session of the Senate marks the vitality of our institutions and the anchoring of democracy in this Fifth Republic, a gauge of freedom and strengthening of the democratic process in our country. I encourage them to legislate for the good of the country, which is why the citizens have elected them.
The work of this session promises to be intense and strategic, given the country's economic, social, and institutional challenges.
A report by our Lomé correspondent Sivi Wadrago and voiced by Francis Boniface. Let me take you to Ghana at the moment, where President John Dramani Mahama just hosted a high-level engagement with major civil society organizations and stakeholders at the Jubilee House to deliberate on lasting solutions to curb Ghana's illegal mining menace, popularly known as Galamsey. The meeting brought together senior government officials and leading voices from civil society organizations in what the presidency describes as a platform for frank and constructive discussions on the environmental and social crisis caused by illegal mining. Here is President John Dramani Mahama.
We need a substantially bigger budget than we have currently to be able to win this war. Happily, budget hearings have started. The budget for next year is going to be presented to Parliament, and my expectation is that the Minister of Finance will give a much bigger allocation to this fight against Galamsey. One of the important successes is the change in the whole issue of excavators. Excavators came in huge quantities, but the law actually says that you must get a permit before you import the excavator. And so now we're enforcing that law. And so you can't bring an excavator in, you can't put it on a ship, and we're telling the shipping agencies, if you bring an excavator for which there's no permit, we shall penalize you, the shipping agency, for carrying that excavator here to Ghana. We came to meet a huge quantity of excavators in the port.
And that's Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama. Still in Ghana, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is urging President John Dramani Mahama's government to urgently pass the long-delayed community sentencing bill. The Commission describes the bill as a critical measure to address the persistent overcrowding in the country's prison facilities. Following a recent promotion mission to Ghana, the African Rights Commission highlighted systemic gaps within the justice and detention systems, ranging from severe prison congestion to inconsistent adherence to human rights standards, which continues to undermine the right and dignity of detainees despite ongoing reforms efforts. Here is Nade Detector from Accra with the details.
The Commission, after a 4-day mission to Ghana, found that the Nsawan medium security prison now holds nearly 3,500 inmates, more than 3 times its original capacity. The Commission also raised concerns over poor prison conditions, weak application of human rights standards, and lack of training of prison staff.
Prison overcrowding has reached a critical state, with facilities like the Sawam medium security prison operating at over 360% of its intended capacity, holding 3,496 as of yesterday when we visited, against a capacity of 1,000. The delayed passage of the community sentences bill exacerbates this crisis by failing to provide judicial alternatives to incarceration of petty offenses. Furthermore, there is a stark disparity in conditions. While the model prison offers tertiary education, others lack basic educational programs.
It recommended that Ghana urgently pass the sentencing bill, enact anti-torture laws, and empower the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice to conduct unannounced visits to detention facilities.
We also note inadequate police accountability and oversight. Despite plans for an independent complaints committee, current mechanisms for addressing police excesses are insufficient. Allegations of brutality, including the cited case of in 2019 where 7 men were wrongfully labeled and killed as armed robbers, highlight an urgent need for robust, transparent, and independent oversight. The Police Standard Bureau appears inadequate to fully address these systemic issues.
The African Commission on Human and People's Rights, ACHPR, warned that without decisive action, justice reforms will remain fragmented and detainees' rights will continue to be compromised. For WADR, Nadi Tete, Accra.
You're still listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. We are also live on Facebook at WADR English Service, as well as YouTube at WADR News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Nigerian opposition criticizes Tinubu's government over rising poverty and inequality 65 years after independence. Mali's former member of parliament, Masu Haidara, assassinated in armed attack. Ghana's President Mahama reiterates commitment to combat illegal mining. And still ahead in the news, 4th edition of the African Fact Check Summit concludes in Dakar with a call for the protection of information integrity. We do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Back here in Senegal, the 4th edition of the Africa Fact Check Summit concluded on Thursday in Dakar with a passionate call to preserve democracy through information integrity. Panelists in various sessions discussed issues of disinformation within conflict crisis on the continent, including disinformation in gender and climate change, among other critical issues. The summit, which brought together over 200 fact-checking organizations across the continent, committed to safeguarding information sovereignty on the continent. Regional Director of Reporters Without Border, Sub-Saharan Africa, Sadibu Maron, will later join us during our guest interview for more on this particular development. But let me take you to Benin for some electoral issues, as the country's preparation is gaining momentum for the upcoming 2026 general elections. On Thursday, important entities such as the Constitutional Court, the National Autonomous Electoral Commission, SENA, and the National Agency for the Identification of Persons came together to discuss essential matters concerning the electoral process. The discussions centered largely on assessing advancements in updating the computerized voter registry. Additionally, the gathering sought to pinpoint the proactiveness, address possible technical and legal hurdles, and all with the objective of guaranteeing a transparent and inclusive electoral process that adheres strictly to constitutional standards. Sankole Janko tells us more in this report.
In his opening remarks, Dorothy Sosa, president of the Constitutional Court, emphasized that the reliability of the electoral roll is a sine qua non for holding credible elections. He also underscored the responsibility of institutions in safeguarding internal peace and called for collective mobilization to ensure a peaceful, democratic and transparent electoral process. Echoing this sentiment, Saka Lafia, president of the Autonomous National Electoral Commission, SENA, welcomed the initiative, describing it as an important turning point in the preparations for the 2026 elections. His primary concern, however, remains the harmonization of electoral data. Lafia noted that the National Agency for the Identification of Persons, ANIP, remains the dedicated technician tasked with ensuring data consistency, despite ongoing challenges related to civil registration. Meanwhile, Aristide Ajinaku, Director General of ANIP, provided an update on the progress of their work. He highlighted the implementation of voter identity verification systems and data security mechanisms, both of which are essential to ensuring the integrity of the electoral register. As a reminder, Benin's general elections are scheduled to take place on January 11, 2026.
And that's a report by WADR's correspondent in Cotonou, Aziza Damsole, and voiced by Sankole Janko.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In our guest interview, we focus on the fourth edition of the Africa Fact Check Summit, which just ended or concluded in Dakar with a passionate call to preserve democracy through information integrity. Now, panelists in various sessions discussed the importance of disinformation on conflict zones on the continent and its effects on the campaign for gender equality, as well as efforts to combat climate change, among other critical issues. Our guest is Regional Director of Reporters Without Borders, Sub-Saharan Africa, Sadibou Maron.
In terms of cartography, if you take Africa's Sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, and you try to analyze where crises are, you will realize that, for example, we have Sudan, we have DRC, the northern Kivu in DRC, we have the Sahel, we have more or less a bit of Somalia, and we also have the risk of a crisis in after the election context. For example, upcoming elections will be in Cameroon, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Tanzania, and so on. So, disinformation in time of crisis most of the time is developed by those actors who are part into the conflict. For example, like in Sudan, where, for example, you have, the paramilitary groups. You have, the state actors. Each of the groups is trying to develop its own narrative in terms of disinformation. And journalists, those who are doing journalism, and those whose job is, to go collect and come and prepare and diffuse and broadcast information are journalists, but most of them also, they might be trapped into that. That's why, for example, we have seen a large number of journalists from Sudan leaving the country, and that's the same also in northern Kivu, in DRC, in Democratic Republic of Congo. Actually, we have, from RSF monitoring, we have had more than 50 journalists, attacked since December 2024. Now the figure might increase, and we also have more than 90 attacks against journalists themselves and against media houses, including community radio stations.
This is the fourth summit of the Africa Fact Checking, and the question is, are we winning the fight over misinformation and disinformation, looking at the fact that all of these crises still seems to be existing?
I think for so long time, organization like Africa Checks has been, doing their utmost the best. And I was saying, for example, during the opening ceremony here, it was There were a lot of emotional situation when you saw, for example, people like Asanjan, Samba Jalim Pabaji, and Peter, and others being, they work, they fight, being acknowledged by their peers here. That means what? That means that at the very beginning, the possibility to do fact check was very slow and was very narrow. But now, years and years later, now we are in front of, one of the best fact-checking organizations in the world, which is based in Africa, and this is also something which might be taken into consideration as an honor. But as the days and months and years will go, disinformation will stay, and that means strategies also to debunk it will develop. That's why it's important, for example, African fact-checking organization, which are here in the continent, needs to get together, to develop more strategies, to be together, to go together as one, because the fight has started, but we need to win the fight because over all what we have seen spreading the continent.
What do you say to social media users as well as the owners of social media to be aware of some of the ills being channeled out on social media by some individuals in the spirit of free speech and then freedom of expression? Plus, in the age of artificial intelligence, how should people, consumers, be worried and be aware of stories churned out that are not necessarily in their interests?
I think AI will still take place. AI will still continue in a complex world and issues. But AI needs to be considered as a tool also, but beyond, what is important from our strategy and perspective is to consider it also as an added value. But before, in terms of journalism and fight against the human angle, it needs to be encouraged. The human angle needs to take place, need to be considered. This is something which is in. But on social media, the social media platforms, and the challenge also still is here in front of social media platform, how to not use the social media platform as a kind of strategy or means or channels to spark or to spread disinformation. This isn't something which is more interpolating the platforms and those platforms moderating the social media.
And that the regional director of Reporters Without Borders Sub-Saharan Africa, Sadibu Maron. And anytime you hear that whistle, it tells you that it's time for sports. And Augustine Colley joins me. Augustine, what's the latest in the world of football?
Well, good evening, Chris. FIFA President Gianni Infantino said the football cannot solve geopolitical problems as he comes under pressure to suspend Israel over the Palestinian conflict. The sports world governing body said in a statement that at a meeting of FIFA Council, Infantino stressed the importance of promoting peace and unity, particularly in the context of the ongoing situation in Gaza. Infantino said FIFA is committed to using the power of football to bring peace together in a divided world. Let's take you now to the ongoing Under-20 World Cup qualifiers. South Africa has bounced back after its opening defeat to France, 2-1. The Amajita made an emphatic statement by crushing New Caledonia 5-0 at the El Tienin Stadium in Rakangwa, reigniting their chances of qualification. With this convincing victory, South Africa now holds a record of 1 win and 1 loss. Their final group match against the United States on Sunday will be crucial in determining their place in the round of 16. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Under-20 team emerged victorious in the trailing encounter against Saudi Arabia, 3-2 at Estadio Fiscal de Dakar. The decisive goal came in injury time, with the young Nigerians securing an invaluable win to keep their hopes alive in the Under-20 World Cup group stage. This hard-fought triumph positions Nigeria firmly back in contention for advancing further in the tournament.
That sounds beautiful, and of course it's beautiful. I hope Imo Ede to be very, very happy about Nigeria's progress in the Under-20
all
tournament.
All Nigerians,
yeah. You know, very well, Ghana and Nigeria, we are good friends.
No, but Nigeria is doing well than Ghana. You can tell from
Augustine?
the women
As a CAF Women Championship, what they did.
And then the basketball as well.
The basketball, Only the men are not doing well this season. Ghana is struggling, so you guys cannot be...
Augustine, thank you very much. And so that ends sports this evening. And with that, we've come to the end of this evening's edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to Fali Luso and Ismaila Kamara for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR English, and on Facebook at WADR English Service. I am Christopher Aticho. Good evening and enjoy the rest of our broadcasts.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kaigama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone in Nigeria, and Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.